Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Second Party Podcast. Recently, I've been reading through Letters to Malcolm by C.S. Lewis, and he's been talking a bit about the past and how things change over time and how we can get wrapped up in a past view or a past desire and how that can affect some of our future desires. And he talks a bit about how, that expectation that we had for how something would go can sometimes blind us to the real beauty of what is occurring instead or what's unfolding in front of us. And it really reminded me recently of something that I've observed with my parents' generation. My wife and I have been going on walks around our neighborhood, which happens to be in the suburbs. It's kind of a similar area to where we grew up. We've noticed that in places where you'd think there would be a bunch of families and a bunch of kids running around, that there really aren't. And I've heard about, some people moving, and you get an understanding of who's living in what houses. And one of the things that, correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the things that I've really begun to observe is that a lot of people who, raised their kids in the suburbs and had that typical suburban life, they're staying in their same types of houses, or they're actually upgrading homes in the same area rather than moving on to something different somewhere else. So even though they're empty nesters, their kids are out of the house, they don't necessarily have a need for that, 6 or 7 bedroom McMansion on the side of the block with the brick exterior that they had always dreamed about. What they're doing is either A, they're converting their homes and heavily renovating them so that it becomes that, or they're moving homes to something like that. So the areas where people used to be raising their kids have the same people, but
the
at
kids
this
are
new
grown
life
up
stage.
and gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So instead of cycling in and out, right, this area has a bunch of young families. Instead, it's the same people who have always lived there, but without the young families.
Yeah, this is kind of a empirical observation that we've had just in this city that we live in. But like you said, we've grown up here, so we remember being kids here in this town, and it is a very, like you said, suburban area. It's historically been a very family friendly, full of a lot of young family, a lot of young kids. You could go walking around at parks in the summer, and there's going to be kids running around all over the place.
Dozens of kids.
Yeah,
at
that's
any
how
given park,
how I remember it being here when I was a kid. And the past few years, we will go on walks in some of the same areas, go back to neighborhoods we grew up in, because there's great walking trails and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just apocalyptic. Everything seems deserted. The parks are just empty. Yeah. Or if you do find a kid out here or a kid out there, it's very rare. Well, it's not full of families and full of children running around anymore.
Well, and the other thing I would add to that is, not only do I think we observe a lot of renovations going on, but the homes look a lot nicer.
Yeah, part of that is, that's what happens as a city matures over years and years and decades.
Yeah, but I'm saying a house that was kind of a mid-tier thing before, just by nature of the plot of land and the location. Now they're hyper renovating it and putting a ton of super nice materials into that home, despite the location not really supporting that level of build.
I don't know that I agree that the location doesn't support it. I think that the area we live is still a very highly desirable area for a lot of reasons. And I think what we've seen happening, part of this is the housing market has been insane the past few years. So house prices have like doubled. Like homes that used to be entry level single family starter homes are not that anymore. And part of it could be because people are renovating them and making them really nice now. But I think they are doing that in response to like an elevated group of buyers that are looking in this area. And a lot of them are people who grew up with their kids here, but they still want to stay here in the suburbs in these family homes with 5-6 bedrooms, even though they don't have kids anymore. And they're driving those prices up because that demand is there. So the neighborhood is supporting it in that the demand is there and there are people who are buying them, but it's not young families. And that's why the parks are deserted of young families now, it seems like.
Sure.
Or we see more people, like about half the time we see young kids out at the parks. We see them with people who look like their grandparents.
Yes.
Not people who look like the parents.
Yeah, and I think...
This is like where the grandparents live now.
Yeah, I think it's not just a function of, oh, well, people are getting older and the environment changes. No, like the people who purchased these homes and the setup with the parks and the paths and the suburbia type of thing and the school districts, all of these things are designed to be like homes for families.
Yes.
And it's to the point where it makes absolutely no sense for these people to own these homes. Like, we are legitimately talking about empty nesters where the kids aren't like even going to be coming back from college because they're married or out of state or what have you. And these people are going out and buying 7-bedroom homes. That's crazy.
No, I know.
It makes no sense.
We live in the specific neighborhood we live in too is we don't live in a 6-bedroom home by any means. We live in a townhome, okay?
Yeah.
But we live in this townhome, this little townhome community that's kind of on this corner of a block that's right next to where there are very large, very nice homes.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of a very desirable area. So it's interesting because I feel like we live in kind of a quote unquote richy area, but we live in a townhome that's tiny and it's like this small community of like small affordable townhomes.
Yeah.
But we go walking and we see all these big, very nice houses that are quite expensive. And I'm always on Zillow because I love watching the housing market and just, you know, real estate. It's interesting to me, whatever. And so I keep track of all the homes in our neighborhood, what they're selling for. And so we'll go on a walk and I'll be like, oh, that house just sold in April. Look at the people who are out there tending the lawn.
Yep. And
it's a massive, massive house with a pool. It's like a 4,500 square foot house with 6 bedrooms and a pool in a very nice neighborhood.
Yep.
And these people who bought it look like they're in their 60s.
Yep. Yeah. Basically every single time without fail.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we are... is it the protagonist in Great Gatsby? Is it Nick Carraway?
I don't remember his
Okay,
name.
I feel like we are like the protagonist in Gatsby.
That's kind of funny.
Like
that's
the
a funny
little
comparison.
house right next door to the massive mansions. Like, that's us.
That is kind of us, actually.
Nice area, super tiny house, and then we get to observe.
And we do observe what's going on, and it is really interesting. And it's kind of sad because there are a lot of these neighborhoods that are, the infrastructure and everything's designed to be a family, you know, friendly neighborhood.
Yeah, like baseball fields and, you know, parks and swings and...
We live literally right across the street from a middle school and an elementary school. And so this is supposed to be like a family area. And we go walking and all these nice houses, they're not young families living in them. And the parks are deserted.
Middle-aged, older couples without kids out on a walk. And I think...
And I think if you go back in time, 20 years, I think they probably were young families living in those same houses.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know of people where they're just living in the same house and they've just done a bunch of upgrades to it. I think really what this boils down to the mentality of that kind of generation that we're seeing, I think is one of kind of what I was referring to in Letters of Malcolm, where they've not let go of whatever their dream was 20 years ago.
When they were 30. Yeah.
Yeah. So when they're 30, they had some dream of, oh, if I could buy the 7-bedroom instead of getting the 5-bedroom or whatever, and if I could have the brick exterior and the 3rd car garage, then that would be so
style
great.
Home in this elite neighborhood, like that's what they wanted when they were 30.
Mm-hmm. And now they're 50 and their kids are out of the house and they want to go live that 30-year-old dream.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, the 30-year-old dream, in my mind at least, is predicated on a time of life, and then you have an almost like what is it called? Tragedy of the masses? No. Tragedy of the commons. You have an almost tragedy of the commons type situation where these people want to be in this area because, oh, well, it's this great area with families and I'd love to walk around and like still see kids
Everyone
and
loves
have
to be in
that joy.
family-friendly areas.
Yeah, everyone likes that. But when everyone does that, there are no families to be in that area.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what's happening a lot in our city is those areas are getting, the younger families are getting priced out of them because there are all those older generation people who want to be there still.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the money, they're doing the renovations, they're making the houses all nice, and the demand is there for those houses, that those people are buying them up, and it's just not young families anymore. And it's harder when you're 25 or 30 to be able to compete financially for a house you want against someone who's 58 looking for the same house and has, way more assets than you do. They like
their purchasing
the younger
power
families
is way higher.
are getting priced out of the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And so the neighborhoods are deserted out of families now, and it's really sad. Like I don't really, I don't know. Part of it, I have nostalgia for the area we live, but I want to get out of it, honestly. Like I don't like living here anymore. And we're young.
Well, it's not the thing that it used to be.
No.
And I think you just kind of have to make peace with that sometimes, and just recognize that you can't repeat the past. I think that's kind of a theme in Gatsby. I referred to that a bit earlier, but one of my favorite quotes in that is Gatsby is talking to the protagonist. I think it's Nick Carraway. And he says, "Can't repeat the past. Why, of course you can." And I think just that mentality is part of what's driving this, like this pervasive, oh, well, yeah, of course I can go back and repeat the past. Of course I can go back and live that dream that I always wanted. I've talked about my parents a bit on the podcast here. My parents are very unique individuals, I think. They're people that I think you kind of love or hate. Very unique, and one of the things that they've done.
So do you love or you hate your parents?
I love my parents, of course.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Of course, but one of the things that they've done, in contrast to what we've been talking about here, is they sold their place that I grew up in, and they went out and they purchased, I want to say it's like a 1,500 square foot house on just
one bedroom.
A little river. It's literally a 1-bedroom house. Yeah. That's it. And they're
on the river.
Yeah, on the river. They're just living their little dream. And I really respect that they've allowed their dream to evolve and change over time
with their
as
life
their
stage.
life evolves and changes too.
Right.
And I think that's something that we really have to do.
I think that's part of what maturing and like growing up is. I don't just mean growing up from like an adolescent to an adult. I mean growing throughout your whole life.
Oh yeah.
Right, because think about all the big key life stages that a person goes through in their life, right? Childhood, young adulthood, having a
Yeah.
family with young kids, having a family with old kids, having grandchildren. Like these are big different life stages.
Yeah.
And all of them should probably come with some slight differences in what your priorities in your life look like, or
Yeah. You have to adapt and change.
what your goals are, what your
Yeah.
dreams are. You know, the house you're living in is just kind of a representation of some of that. But I think it's a sign of being able to make peace with the stage of life you're at and living like that, right? It's like the people who are in their 60s and they're trying to look like they're 30 still. And it's just
Yeah.
you look freaky.
Yeah. Bill Burr's got a great bit on that, yeah.
accept that you're 60. It's fine. It's fine to look 60 when you're 60, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, it's Bill Burr. It's like you can either look 60 or you can look like a 60-year-old lizard trying to look 30 or something. Like those are your two options. Just pick looking 60. It's okay.
Yeah. I kind of, we were talking about this a little while back, but one of the things that I've been thinking about recently, because your brother's graduating, so we went back and we got to watch him walk at graduation and
Graduating high school.
graduating high school.
My
And-
youngest brother too. So my
Yeah.
parents are very soon to be empty nesters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's doing his last track meet, and there's a bunch of kind of little milestones of sorts that he's going through. So it's spurred me to start thinking back a little bit like that. And I just started realizing, like, I don't really reminisce about the past much. And it's not because I didn't have fun or I didn't like it. And maybe in part this is just me being really blessed, and in part it's kind of my disposition or outlook on life. But I just kind of feel like each life stage is kind of getting a bit better, right? Like there's this consistent upwards trajectory. And when you have that upwards trajectory, like why look back and reminisce all the time when there's so much great in front of you?
Well, I think there's a difference between reminiscing, that word you're using, and
Sure.
like being stuck on the past.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah, that's true.
well, if Coach had just put me in on that,
You're
the
talking
high
about
school
Uncle
football.
Rico and Napoleon
Yeah,
Dynamite.
yeah,
If
Like,
Coach had put me in, we would have gone to state. I would have gone pro.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with, like, I'm just saying the word reminiscing
Sure.
is not actually a bad thing. Reminiscing just means to recall fondly about something in
Yeah.
the past. But I think there's a difference between that and then getting stuck and hung up on it and not being able to live in the moment you're in now, and like kind of envying your past life almost.
Yeah. I think if there's a way that I tend, it's probably towards looking a little bit too much into the future.
Yeah. Rather than living right now.
Yeah,
Be
and like
looking for the next
appreciating
thing.
everything
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
Probably same.
There was a message in college, actually. I don't remember who did it. I think it was a guest speaker or something, but they were talking about...
At our church.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. At our campus ministry in college.
Oh, okay.
And this preacher was talking about the disposition that we should have towards the past and the future. And they were basically saying, like, you can't go into the past or conceive about the future and like do that on your own, or rather you shouldn't. You shouldn't be going mentally into either of those spaces, like considering or reminiscing or planning. You shouldn't be doing any of that without like a massive drop of, well, like, let me kind of give up control to God in this. And I think they phrased it something like, you can't go into the past or the future without God.
I don't get what that's getting at.
Okay, so what is it that you don't understand, I guess?
You can't dwell on the past or fret about the future without God. I don't understand what you're getting at here.
Oh, they're saying you shouldn't be reliving a bunch of old memories, whether good or bad, without like humbly submitting them to God. You shouldn't be considering future plans without humbly submitting them to God and saying, like, your will be done. And it's when we're doing either of those two things, going into, quote unquote, the past or going into the future without God. That's when we end up in a place of, to be quite frank, like usually sin. When you start beating yourself up too much over some previous thing that you did wrong, or you start hyping yourself up because you did something so great, or you say, oh, well, I'm going to go do this in the future and it's going to be so awesome.
We'll just go to this town and we'll have this business venture in this town and we'll have this business.
Like
what's that Bible verse?
Yeah, but like I think if you go into the past or the future without like having God so much at the forefront there, you're kind of putting yourself in the place of God, right? Because you're saying fundamentally, well, I'm
in control of my destiny.
Yeah, either I'm in control of my destiny going forward, or like I have the authority to like punish or elevate past me. I can be the judge of past me, or I can dictate future me.
Okay.
We're talking about going into like the past or the future, how we should conceive of the past. I think it's interesting to look at people who are in different life stages, because people who are older than you usually say something to the effect of, well, life moves really fast and you should slow down and really be thoughtful and
savor every moment,
savor things. And then usually on the younger side you've got people who are just kind of running through things at what seems like a breakneck speed, right? It's kind of like the flip side of that. But I think it's good to kind of hear from both sides there. And one of the things I've been considering recently is kind of looking at my grandparents and your grandparents and what their disposition, let's say, towards the past is. And one of them, and two of them kind of stick out to me. One of them is one of my grandparents has kind of always had this mentality or attitude of like the good old days. Given his age, he always kind of harkens back to this, what he sees as like golden era of like Elvis Presley and like the big old school like Cadillacs and like old school luxury cigars, bourbon, like that whole Al Capone mafia type of lifestyle.
Rolex too. He's into Rolex. Doesn't he have a fake one?
No, but like he's got like a big watch and stuff like that.
I thought he had like actually a fake one.
No.
Okay.
But I just think like, well, and this has, in my opinion, really hurt a lot of the relationships that he's had, because in part he's kind of doing like the Mr. Incredible thing, like trying to relive the glory days and missing what's in front of him right then. He's kind of done this for a while, and I just feel like it's kind of tough to watch somebody do that. And by contrast, I think one of your grandparents, I think he does a really, really good job at this. He seems to, like, just even in the time that I've known you, which in terms of his whole life is, a small amount, I've seen him really change how he goes about things, how he lives his life, not in like these drastic ways, but I've just seen like small shifts and, like a realization or an acceptance of like, this thing's kind of done in the past for me, and now I get to adopt these new different things.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. I think I've seen that with him a lot in the past year or so, because my grandma died last summer.
Yeah, he
And
lost his wife.
Yeah,
and
and
like 50 plus years.
They were married for over 50 years, like
Yeah.
whatever. And I think I really respect, I guess, just what I've seen of how he's handled it all. Like, obviously that's a just really hard thing to go through. You know, even if we can sit here and we can celebrate her life and we can celebrate knowing that she's home with her savior and like she's okay, and yeah, that's comforting and all, but that doesn't mean it's not hard to have to wrestle with the fact that you're not going to daily be around this person you've been around with for over half a century. That is a hard thing.
I can't even imagine.
That is a hard thing to adjust to. I can't even imagine, and I'm nowhere close to that situation. And I think he's really taken it in stride and just, you know, been able to really like praise God through it all and be grateful for what he's had, but also come to acceptance of like, you know, he bought and moved into a new house like the week before she died.
Yeah.
And the plan with this move was to accommodate her because she was not able to do stairs anymore and their old house was a split level. And so he was doing this and making this change, and I'm talking to him recently and he's like, yeah, I think I gotta figure out something else, like somewhere else to move, because this is a family home that I live in and I don't have a family living with me anymore. So I need to find the next phase and do that. And he's like, I want a family to be living in this home. Like, circling back to kind of the original... Like,
almost the exact opposite of that mentality.
We're talking about at the beginning here. But, yeah, and he said that to me, and I was just thinking about that, and, like, having peace, coming to a new phase in your life where, like, you have to recognize that this is not what's for me anymore. You know, like, I have to move on to something else because that's just not what my life is anymore.
Well, and I think the other thing that he's been doing a lot more of, and maybe in part, you know, this is, you could maybe say it's in part coping, it's, you know, wanting to be around people, but he wasn't able to travel or road trip to see his kids who all moved out of that town where he lives. As much when your grandma was around. And now that she's not, he's spent a lot more time with his kids and grandkids and great grandkids hanging out, and I think
helping them with things.
But really moving into just like a different phase, and like I'm sure that it's, I can't imagine how difficult it would be, but I don't know, he's kind of a stoic man, but just that ability to not like linger on the past, but also not like trivialize it or throw it away, and to take what's in front of him with whatever positives there may be there. I think it's something really respectable, really commendable.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it shows maturity in being able to accept where you're at. Because life changes, and if you can't change and adapt with it, you're going to find yourself stuck, I think. And I just think it's so important to be able to adapt with life phases as you get older and as your life changes. And I think that's how you're going to find the most satisfaction ultimately and meaning in your life, is when you're able to do that and to accept where you are. And it's a hard thing to do. I'm no expert on this. You know, I haven't gone through that many life stages, but just things I've seen and things I've heard from people. It's something that I really want to try to be conscious about for myself up front. You know, going into life understanding that things are going to change. And a lot of times I might be resistant to the change at first. It might be painful to have to adapt with change. But recognizing that it is going to happen and that I'm not always going to have control over how that happens and when it happens, I think is a way to be better prepared for it. And I think that's the proper way to go about life.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the negative side, if you don't go into things with that mentality, is you get stuck in the past, like what Gatsby gets stuck on. Going, oh, well, yeah, of course, we can go back in time and we can do it all over again. There's no problem with that. Or like,
it leads to his destruction.
Yeah, I think we've seen this with some of our friends who struggle to like leave college, and they end up like trying to stick around either in the same place because they don't want to leave people, or they extend their college experience, right? They try and go for another degree, but it's not because they actually want to get that specific degree or it matters for their career. It's because like they can't let go of that point in their life. They're almost like too scared to move into the next thing because it's this kind of unknown. And then you lose out, I think, on some of those benefits.
You know, I think that is part of why I'm kind of antsy to move and get out of where we live. Because I think you and I both, like, for reasons we talked about at the beginning, but also a lot of other reasons, we're just kind of done here. Like, I don't really want to live here anymore, you know?
I get what you're saying to a degree, yeah.
I think about your sister and her husband. I mean, they just moved several states away.
Like halfway across the country.
Big move. And they were very excited about it. I think it's going to be really good for them. And I don't want to move across the country because I like the general metro area we live in. But I'm antsy to go do something else. You know?
Yeah, like, but I mean, I think you can move into and have you can move into a new life stage. You can have a new adventure with other things too.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying you have to move into a new life stage per se, but
on a similar note, I want to read a line from Letters to Malcolm. It's kind of around the same section, but it reads, "It would be rash to say that there is any prayer which God never grants, but the strongest candidate is the prayer we might express in the single word, encore."
Okay.
I don't know. That just hit me really hard.
I need to give it like 5 minutes.
Well, I can read it again. "It would be rash to say that there is any prayer which God never grants, but the strongest candidate is the prayer we might express in the single word, encore."
Okay, so I'm a little slow. It's saying a prayer that's like you're looking after the same thing and not
like I just want that
not
again.
being prepared to grow
more.
And adapt and change into the future. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. I read that and that hit me so hard, and I immediately thought about that line in Gatsby, like, can't repeat the past, why of course you can. And then, not to spoil a book that's, decades old, but
if this is a spoiler for you, that's your fault.
Yeah. But Gatsby meets like his tragic end.
Yeah. Doesn't he like die in a pool? How does that end? I haven't read that book since literally high school.
Yeah, he's shot.
Oh, he's shot?
Yeah, he's shot by the husband.
Daisy's husband?
No.
Oh.
The husband of Daisy's husband's mistress.
Oh, I can't believe you remember that. I don't remember that. I just remember he dies in a pool.
Well, in any case, he meets like a tragic end. And his entire character, like essentially everything that he does in the entire book is motivated by that phrase, can't repeat the past, why of course you can.
Yeah.
Everything is motivated towards that.
He's completely unable to let go of the past.
Yeah. I think that might be why it's like one of the books on like I it's not my favorite book, but it's on like my top 20 or whatever, because I think it does a really good job at like examining that. And that's something that I think a lot about. Like you can't go back. You can't live that thing again. And when we look back too far, when we make like the past or our past circumstance almost like an idol for us, we miss out on what's right in front of us.
And possibly what God is calling us to, you know, like actually the best life that he wants for you.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of see that in The Incredibles too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, Mr. Incredible is trying to, as his wife puts it, like, relive the past, relive the glory days.
Yeah.
And he replies, you act like reliving the glory days is a bad thing. And then she immediately follows up with,
it is a bad thing, Bob. Right? Isn't that what she says?
Yeah, and then she goes on to say, you're missing this. Our family is what's happening now, Bob.
Yeah.
And
then,
that
movie's so good.
But then in the end, he comes to realize, like, yeah, this is actually what matters. Like, right now, the things that I've been blessed with, the things that are in front of me, those are what matter and what I should be focusing on. Not trying to repeat the past, not trying to relive it, not trying to ask for that encore. And I think that's something that we would do well to try and learn from. Well, with that, it's getting late. But recently, my wife and I have watched some just absolutely phenomenal banger movies and have discovered a couple of really just phenomenal songs. And I saw just an absolutely insane track race recently. And all of these things got me thinking about how we observe amazing things. There's a sort of buy-in that we get to, whether it be a sports team that you love or a phenomenal, dish at a restaurant. There's kind of a buy-in that you have. It's tough to look away. And, I think when you're somebody who wants the best for people and you're celebrating the achievements of that creator, an art form or that athlete, when you're celebrating those achievements, it's almost like you're on the same team. You get that thrill of emotion, you get to live almost vicariously through them. And I think that's in part, at least I suspect, that this will be kind of what it feels like when Jesus comes back. Like, we'll get to sit here marveling in awe, like a piece of just wonderful art, like a perfect dish, like a stunning piece of cinema. We'll get to sit there celebrating. We'll get to benefit and feel like we're a part of it. It'll feel like our team is winning, like goodness over evil. And I think that we can really see like Jesus and God's love in beautiful art like that. But that's just what I've been musing about recently. If you have any thoughts on this or the past or Gatsby, feel free to send us an email at secondpartypodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. With that, thank you again for listening. Have a good night.